Hello, my name is Pam Benton. I'm the Supervisor of World Languages for Pinellas County Schools, and I'd like to welcome you today to our webinar, Preparing for the AP Spanish Language and Culture exam. We will be talking today about things that you can do to make yourself ready for this AP Spanish Language and Culture exam. So we'll move on. I'm going to introduce first the teachers who will be presenting today. The first one is Rita Hensley Damp. Rita is an AP teacher at Eastlake High School, and she also teaches level 2 and occasionally other things. She'll be talking to you today about a review of the exam dates and the format of the exam. Ashley French is the AP language teacher at Dunedin High School. She'll be talking to you about listening, reading, and then the listening and reading combined section. Simulated conversation and cultural comparison will be presented by Esther Gonzalez Wright, who teaches AP Spanish language at St. Petersburg High School. And the email response and the essay, the writing section, will be presented by Linda Santiago, who's the AP teacher at Lakewood High School. All of these teachers are wonderful. They have great experience, and they'll be able to provide us with a lot of good tips for what you can do to prepare yourself for this exam. So, Rita, take it away.
Hi, everybody. So as you can see on the screen, the exams are coming up soon. The Spanish language is Friday, May 21st at 8 a.m. I believe that all of these exams will be given in your school. And so they'll be right in school where you're comfortable and you're familiar with everything. There also are the dates for the Spanish Lit, German, Chinese, and French. They will all be given in school with paper and pencil, no online tests this year. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the format. Pam, go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so basically the test has two parts. You have the multiple choice section, which you can see up at the top, and then you have a free response section. The multiple choice section has two parts. There's a reading section where you read a selection and respond to multiple choice questions. And then there's a section where you read and hear an audio and respond to questions. And then there's a part that's just audio and you respond to the questions. One tip for that is that these questions usually go in order. So if you missed one of them, you can just kind of listen for it in the listening section, listen for it in that order. That is a helpful tip. The second part is free response. There's 4 things you have to do. You have to write an email, you have to write a persuasive essay, you take part in a simulated conversation, and then you do a cultural comparison. Okay, so 2 of those things you write, email and persuasive essay, and then the last 2, the conversation and the cultural comparison, is where you speak. Can you go to the next slide, please? My favorite resource, we have lots of resources that we use. I really like this AP Spanish. It has an online textbook, but there's also the College Board AP resources, and I'm sure your teachers are using lots of these different resources. Next. Okay. For the first part that's multiple choice, the things that you're going to read are printed text, and they're authentic. So something written in Spanish for Spanish speakers. There's journalistic and literary types of things, announcements, advertisements, letters, charts, maps, graphs, tables. Okay, they're going to ask you to identify the main and supporting idea. So you always want to think, what's the big idea about it? Determine the meaning of vocabulary words in context. What are they trying to say in this section? Identify the author's point of view or the target audience. What is the author trying to say? What's the point there? And demonstrate knowledge of the culture or interdisciplinary information contained in the text. Next slide. Okay, the multiple choice with the audio. You may be hearing things such as podcasts, commercials, conversations, interviews, brief presentations. Again, it's the print and audio combined, and then there's a section that's just audio. 3 sets of audio sources with questions like an interview, instructions, presentations, and you will ask questions again about the main ideas and some of the details. Some questions will require you to demonstrate understanding of culture and interdisciplinary information, and you will have time to read a preview of the selection and skim the questions before listening to the audio. All the audio will be played twice. So look at the questions first, listen for the answers in the audio, and then when you miss the third one, you can listen especially hard for that the second time you hear it. On the free response, the interpersonal writing, you're going to read and respond to an email, and our other presenters will give you a lot more hints on how to do these well. So I'm just going to go over them kind of over the top. Presentational writing, you're going to write an essay. Okay, you've got 3 sources. You're going to have an article to read, a graph, a table, a chart, and an audio source that you will hear twice. And you have to present your own viewpoint. They'll ask you a question and you have to answer what you think, referring to all 3 of the sources. And you have 40 minutes to do that. Next. Interpersonal speaking, this is where you have a conversation. It's a simulated conversation. So you'll have some instructions of what you have to do, and they'll tell you, greet the person. And then when it goes beep, you have to speak for 20 seconds. And there's 5 things that you have to say. And I think it's Ashley who's going to tell us more about that. For the presentational speaking, that's where you do a cultural comparison. They'll ask you a question and you have to compare your culture in the US with a Hispanic culture, and you have to speak for 2 minutes. Next. So that concludes the overview of what's on the test.
Next, we have Ashley French from Dunedin High School.
Hi, everyone. So as we were just told, the first part of the exam is multiple choice, and the first section of that is reading. Okay. Actually, Pam, if we could go ahead and skip to the next slide and come back to this one later. The first part is just reading, where you'll see approximately 4 reading selections. That usually includes some sort of advertisement, like a poster, a literary text that's fiction or a fragment from a story or from a novel, an article with a chart, and a letter. Okay, so you'll have about 40 minutes to go through and read those selections and answer the questions that are related to them. Now, typically that's not enough time to read every single word. Okay, so one of the things that I usually suggest to my students is that as they approach each reading, they should first just scan the reading itself and then read the questions. Okay, before you even get into that part, though, students should absolutely read the introduction. Prior to or just before each reading selection, there is information about what the theme, what AP theme it comes from or is included. And then there's also some other important information about the text, like the type of text it is, like whether or not it will be that ad or that literary text or the letter, etc. Sometimes you might even get a few little details about the author, which is important because it helps you to be able to make predictions and connect with what you already know about that subject matter. Okay. Then, like I said, take a minute to read each selection or scan the selection, and then go back and read the questions. reading the questions before is so important because, again, you don't necessarily have time to read every single word. So if you read the questions, you know what you're looking for and you know what details you're going to, what information you're going to need to be able to answer the questions correctly. Okay, now, as you're reading, it's important to not get caught up or distracted by that one word that you don't know. Okay. You don't necessarily have time to read everything, and you may not understand every single word. And that's okay. That's expected. And hopefully by the time that you've gotten to the exam, you've practiced and you know that that can happen. So your whole focus should be on just understanding the overall message. What's the author's point of view? What cultural aspects are included in the reading? Things that you already know, you're able to use to make inferences, to draw conclusions, and ultimately just make educated guesses. But again, like I said before, read the questions first so you know what details and what things you really need to pay attention to as you scan, as you read each selection. Then some of the readings do include a chart or some other type of informational graphic. So as you're reviewing that, as you're reading a selection or you're looking at, like I said, a poster or a chart, you want to try to connect any ideas that you have from the readings with the information that is in the visual. Sometimes the questions that you have will relate to both items. Okay, so a lot of times the visual, the charts, will provide some information that is also key to correctly answering your questions. The next slide, please. Okay, a lot of the things here I've already mentioned, but as you are reading, you want to just skim the text, pay attention to any cognates, and use those to help you understand what's being stated. Of course, be careful because we know that sometimes that can be tricky and not all cognates are exact translations. You want to focus on gathering the main idea. As you're reading, it's a good idea to underline, circle, put some sort of symbol next to keywords, important facts. Use any background knowledge that you already have to make connections with what you know. Pay attention to the details. Things like sentence order and verb tenses can be key in helping you to understand and answer questions. And then one good thing about this is that you can guess, definitely guess. You don't want to leave anything blank because you're not penalized for wrong answers. Okay, and then prior to the exam, ways that you can just practice on your own with reading at home. Practice reading as much as you can in Spanish. You can look at books, there's news articles, there's magazines, comic books, memes, song lyrics. I always suggest that you just find something that you already enjoy and maybe look for that in Spanish. And it's just to get that practice to kind of train yourself on focusing on the main ideas and just getting the general information. And then if you really want to practice and study while you're reading, take notes. Look up some of the keywords that you don't already know. Okay, now, after you do just the reading section, the next part of it includes both reading and audio. Okay, each one of your reading selections will also have an audio that is combined. Typically, that'll include some sort of report along with like a nonfiction article, and that report could be like a news report, and this is the audio that we're referring to. That audio could be like a news report combined with a nonfiction article about some topic or some piece of information. And of course, both things are related to each other. Sometimes you might have something that is like a conversation, which could be just a regular conversation, or it might be an interview. And often that is combined with some sort of chart or some sort of visual that you have to analyze. And then, of course, after each reading audio combination, there are questions that follow that are based on both sources. Okay. Now, with this section, prior to beginning each selection, you have the opportunity to read the instructions, and then you also have a chance to um, read the questions. Again, like I said before, you absolutely want to take that time to read the introduction and read the questions. By the time you get to the exam, you're going to know, hopefully, students will have practiced so much, so they already know what the instructions are. So that extra minute where they're reading the instructions, students can actually go ahead and start to look at the questions and read the introduction. Again, that's so important because it gives you information about what you should be preparing yourself to hear or to read. Same thing. When you're listening, you probably won't understand every single word, and that's okay. That's expected. And again, with the practice, you expect that and you're comfortable with that. So don't allow yourself to get distracted. Students shouldn't allow themselves to get distracted by that one word that they might not know. It's important the first time to just listen and focus on the big picture. Focus on what is the purpose. And this is when we're doing the listening part. Focus on what they're saying, who's speaking, what their point of view is, what the overall message is. Now, one good thing about the recordings is that they're always played twice. Okay, so first, students will hear the recording one time. After they've had that minute to read the instructions, read the questions, then they play the audio the first time. And then after the first time, students are given an opportunity, a minute to begin to answer the questions, and then the audio is played a second time. While listening to that audio the second time, that is when students should listen for details, specific data like dates, names, locations, anything that they may have missed the first time around, or anything that they know they need to look for or listen for from the questions. Let's see, it says the audio will be played twice while listening. Then after that second time, you have the opportunity again to read those questions and finish answering the questions. Now, for that second part where there's audio and reading combined, a lot of times the questions, of course, are going to be based on both things. So it's important to pay attention to what the question is asking, whether it's asking about the reading or if it's asking about the audio specifically. And then in preparing for listening, I tell my students outside of the classroom, listen to as much Spanish as possible. You have so many resources. There's the radio. We have radio stations here. There's music everywhere. YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, whatever, Apple Music, podcasts, news, movies, television. And I always suggest that students break it up into chunks. Like, for example, if they're listening to a song, maybe focus on just the chorus and only listening to it, not looking at the lyrics, not looking at translations, just really listening and focusing on trying to understand. Same thing with television, maybe do only 10 minutes at a time or 15 minutes at a time, and definitely try to listen to different accents. And then after that combined section where you have both the readings and the listening section, it's just listening. So the tips and the things that I've already said apply to that section as well. Again, just listen first time for the main idea, second time you're listening for the details, and then, like I said, outside of class, make sure you're practicing and listening. Try listening to things that you enjoy. I believe that's it.
Thanks, Ashley. Now we have Esther Gonzalez Wright to talk about speaking.
Hello, I hope everybody's doing well. We are going to go start first part is the simulated conversation. And it's exactly that. It is where you are going to be listening to them and they're going to be talking to you and you're going to respond back to them. The first thing you need to remember, and this is very, very important, gain yourself a little bit of time. Don't bother with the directions. What is important, however, is that you actually read the introduction. The introduction is the one that's going to set up the whole conversation, basically. It will give you big clues as to what is going to be all about. You may not understand everything they say, but if you understand what the topic is, which is that introduction, it will help you kind of steer you in the right direction that you need to go. All right, so gain that 2 or 3 minutes that you have to read directions and focus on reading the introduction. Also, it is 5 different prompts. They look at them as individual, but they're kind of related. So the suggestion is always number each of the prompts so you remember which one you've done already and cross them out as you go along. That way you don't lose, because for every prompt they're going to ask you to do something different. The task will vary. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. So you also have a chance to jot down some ideas. When you look at the prompts, for example, they'll say, respond back with a negative and suggest something different. So once you understand what the topic is, you can start even jotting down some keywords. How do I make something negative? How do I suggest something else? So you can put little words there to help you. You do not have time to write out a conversation because, first of all, you don't know what they're going to be asking you. And the task is respond what they tell you to do. So be careful with that. There's a couple of little tricks. This is one of the shortest activities in the whole exam. It actually takes no more than like 6 minutes to get this part completed of the simulated conversation. Keep in mind also each prompt is graded individually. And even though it's supposed to be a conversation, because it is pre-recorded, sometimes you may have suggested something and it doesn't go with the next one. Don't worry about that. Just make sure you're answering the task. The tasks are the most important things. And there's a lot of keywords that you can use, like when you're thinking natural pauses. They know that you don't have a whole lot of time to prepare when you hear it. So don't be afraid to use natural pauses like, just like you do in English, I think, and you kind of slow it down. The other thing to keep in mind is you have to answer for 20 seconds. Try to take it all the way until you hear the beep. That's very important. Otherwise, it's going to sound like you ran out. It's okay, you run over a little bit because it's going to cut you off, but you want to make sure you definitely answered the task. So that's a really, really important part of it. And remember, you're going to have to listen what the prompt is asking you to do, or the introduction. Is it something formal or is it informal? So you're going to have to look at that to clue you if you're going to have to use more of the formal vocab, or are you talking to a peer? So, and that will let you adjust a little bit. So make sure that you also are familiar with verbs that help you in a conversation. If we'll go on to the next slide here. Okay, so if you look at here for conversations, there's lots of verbs that we normally use in conversation. I accept, don't accept, I can express, you react. So these are verbs that make yourself familiar with, at least for a few for each one, and stick to them, all right? And also, if the conversation started as formal, continue formal, don't switch it, all right? If you start informal, stay informal. Keep going on there. And the other thing that's very important, because you got to talk for 20 seconds, is do not talk in a monotone. Show some that you're alive, okay? Get excited, just like you would in a conversation normally with a friend. Kind of show them, oh, thank you, yes, do not be afraid to use those. Remember, they're listening to a lot of these recordings, so they want to make sure the person is kind of upbeat. Okay, you talk in monotone, it's not gonna help you. You want to make it so it's fun, and again, it doesn't have to be factual. You're just responding to the appropriate task that they're asking you to do, to the prompt. So don't be afraid, get excited. You're making stuff up. It's okay. They're okay with that. Don't be afraid of it. Occasionally, if you think, oh my God, they're answering and I gave them absolutely the opposite answer in the previous prompt, don't worry. Treat each one individually. I know it's hard to let it go, but let it go and just go on to the next one and see what you have to do on the next prompt. All right, and make sure you're completing that. Let's see, typically, again, you might not be able to write a whole lot because again, you don't have about 3 minutes to get ready. And then once it starts coming, it doesn't stop. The person will say, hello, how are you? Hey, I have this problem. And then it'll go beep. And as soon as it starts beeping, you start talking. And then you keep talking until the next beep. And at the end of the second beep, then the person's going to come back again and continue until you get all 5 prompts done. So it goes pretty quick. All right. Like again, if you feel like you're rushing yourself, take a quick breath, use natural pauses. If you're having to think, it's okay. They know you're going to have to think a little bit. All right. So don't panic about that. And you make a mistake. This is huge, huge, huge. If you make a mistake and you know you made it, correct yourself. That self-correction is a huge piece of it. So self-correcting is like you said, buenas instead of buenos, just fix it right there and then. Don't be afraid, or if you go a little bit, just fix it, okay? It lets them know that you're conscious and you're having to think on your feet a little bit here, and it makes them realize that we make mistakes when we're talking, and it's okay to do it on the test too. So don't be afraid of that, all right? So, and if you're not sure, you're not understanding what the person is telling you, make sure you're looking at that task that's written and kind of stay within that topic and stay within what they're asking you to do for the task. So if they're telling you to respond negatively, then respond in some negative way. All right, that's what's going to help you. So don't panic, just try to do it, and you may not get it all, that's okay, but at least give it a try. All right, and make sure you speak clearly. If you muffle too much or mumble, that makes it harder for them. And then it's very hard for them to grade that. So if you want the best possible points, be as clear as you can be. And like I said, self-correct. Don't be afraid of that. We all make those mistakes. Okay? All right. So also make sure that you look at the rubrics that are provided by College Board so you can see how they're going to grade you on that one. So you can kind of reference those rubrics a little bit. And they're available. And probably your teachers have a lot of resources for that, or they're available also on the College Board site. All right, so let's go on to the next one. All right, like I said, we've talked about a lot of these things. Make sure that you are familiar with how you're going to be graded on it. Speak clearly and make sure that you are responding to everything that they have on there within those 20 seconds, okay? All right, and that pretty much covers this simulated conversation. It goes very fast because again, they talk for less than a minute and then you have to respond. So it goes very, very quickly. All right, let's go on to the next one. Okay, also some of the things that you need to make sure, some of the corrections that you should have on the simulated conversation. Use a variety of vocabulary, all right? Make sure you know the differences between some of the idiomatic expressions. If you're able to do some connections there, some transition words, build them in there as best as you can. Again, the grammar, try to make sure that you are speaking in the same tense that they're asking you. So if they're saying something for the future, make sure you can say something's going to happen in the future. or if it's something that happened in the past, make sure you're able to talk in the past a little bit. Make sure that you try to match your adjectives and numbers and gender. General things that you should be able to do. All right. Again, make any of those grammar mistakes, remember to fix it. Don't be afraid. That works in your favor. It doesn't go against you. It helps you. Okay. All right. Moving on to the next one. Okay. Again, answer everything. The other thing is try to sound as confident as you can. And again, that enthusiastic tone goes a long, long way. All right. And don't be afraid to use those natural pauses. Okay. Remember, we all have to think. Sometimes we don't always give answers right away, and it's okay on this test also. All right. Next. Okay. Cultural comparison is very different from the simulated conversation. Here, they only give you 4 minutes to actually read the topic and prepare a response. All right, and then you have 2 minutes to actually record your response. All right, so it's very structured there. Okay, you need to make sure that you are showing them that you understand the differences between the Spanish culture and the culture here in the U.S. All right, there's a lot of different ways. You do not have, in those 4 minutes that you have planning, you do not have time to write out a script. All right, so there's a couple things that you can do to help yourself. You can organize yourself by creating a T-chart of some kind on your paper really quickly, where you can write bullet points for each one based on the topic that they give you. Okay, they're usually going to be very wide open and very general. And you can make it as specific as you want, but you need to make sure that you talk about both countries. One thing that's also suggested is when you're speaking, make sure that you know the main idea of what they want you to talk about, but make sure that you're able to talk about both places regarding the same main idea. All right, so be careful getting into things that are not related. They have to be related because you're comparing them. Okay, they can, and also make sure that when you are comparing, make sure that they are really cultural things. Don't make them up. All right, many of the people that are grading these are actual native speakers, so they understand what needs to be, you know, if you're making up stuff, be careful. All right, if you find that you made a mistake, correct it. One of the big suggestions that we always tell is instead of, you only have the 2 minutes and you need to talk about both countries. So you need to make sure some suggestions that we have sometimes do it like a ping pong match where you talk about one and then say what it's like on the other. And you go back and forth that way instead of doing all at once for one country and then the other one. If you do that, you may end up running out of time. So to avoid that, doing that ping pong where you go back and forth is always a very, very good idea. The other thing that we always, to give you a little time to get kind of settled in, is have an introduction. Say, today I'm going to be talking about, use that topic that they gave you about so-and-so in this country and comparing it to this country. So do a little introduction. That way it sets it up for you. And then as you have time, you should be practicing how long those 2 minutes are. All right, because they are going to cut you at the 2 minutes. Is you can always, if you find that you're running a little bit of time, start coming up with a conclusion. What was it that you want to say overall that they had in common or they had differently? And that in itself will help you kind of wrap it up and finish out the 2 minutes that you have. 2 minutes goes pretty quick. Pace yourself. If you talk too fast, you're not going to be able to get everything that you want in there. And you need to make sure that you do talk about the two countries. That is very, very important. And that pretty much covers the cultural comparison. Like this, it goes really fast. It's done in about 7 minutes. So I now pass it on to my next teammate.
Thanks, Senora Gonzalez-Price. So let me introduce Senora Santiago.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I just came right on time. I'm so happy. Give me one moment. For the email, in the In the exam, when the free response section happens, for the email, there are certain things that you need to make sure that happen. Number one, the register in
Senora
this email.
Santiago,
Yes.
let me stop you. There's a pretty bad echo. Can everybody mute besides Linda, please?
Oh, may I continue?
Yes.
Okay. So the register must be formal because you are responding to someone that you do not know, and it has so you are going to use the formal. That will be usted, and that will be señor, señora, estimado, all those words that will indicate that you know that you are treating someone in a respectful way. Um, it is really important that the first thing that you do is to read that prompt and that you take the time to look at the keywords, underline them, and underline the things that you have to do in the prompt. So for example, if it's telling you that you have to get some information, then you underline information and you make sure that that's one of the things that is included in your answer. They will give you a printout that it would look like if it was a printout out of a computer with a regular email, and you will read that and you will have to give 150 word response, more or less. You only have 15 minutes to both read the email that has been provided to you and write the email that you have to write. I will strongly recommend that you leave some time, a minute or two, for you to review what you've written. And very important, you must have, this is a definite, a greeting, and you also must have an ending, as in like have a great day, thanks for your time, etc. Then you have to have a closing. So so the reader that is looking at your response knows that you knew that you were writing this. So you will have something like sincerely, fondly, not fondly because that wouldn't be formal. And then you must write a name, sign a name. So it shows that you were the creator of this. Make sure that you respond to all your questions, to all the questions in the email, and whatever information they're requesting, that it is part of your answer. Please make sure that you write a question. I even tell my students to write 2 questions just to make sure that they address that point, which is to ask a question. Make sure that you add details when you are writing down the answers to their questions and including some of you in that email. Make a cultural reference so they know, for example, if you're traveling to, let's say that it's traveling, so that you know about the weather. So if it's for South America and it's in June, you know that indeed it's not going to be summer, it's going to be winter or something like that. You should be able to include the subjunctive there or show some type of higher grammar, because at the level that this correspondence should be, and at the level that you're in the language, that should be part of it, and have some prepositional phrases as well. Senora, we could go to the next slide. Now, when you are preparing for this, the key thing is that you have a good sense of the time. Time yourself and make sure, like what I mentioned before, that you leave some time at the end to go back so you can proofread what you wrote. Even though you don't have that much time, it's only 15 minutes to accomplish everything you need to do, try to organize yourself when you are reading that email. Since you can write anything you want on the handout that you get, jot down some ideas so you know exactly how you're going to address your answer. And if at the end you have time when you're proofreading, agreement should be correct. Make sure that you have a little bit of subjunctive in there if you can. That the adjectives and the nouns agree. And if, and this won't make you or break you having accent marks or not. However, it will be nice if you can make sure it's there, that it's used correctly. And other things like ser and estar, por and para, and things that you have been working on all these years that you have been taking Spanish. Señores, we could go to the next one. And that was all for the writing in the email. So just to close on that point, just make sure that you know that you have 15 minutes prior to taking the exam, that you are aware of what 15 minutes feel like, and that you have read those instructions and you know exactly what the requirements are. So on the day of the exam, you can use all your time to read and respond to the email. For the argumentative essay, you are going to have more time. However, you also have more to do. For this argumentative essay, you are going to have 3 different sources that you will have to use in order to respond or write your essay. The sources are going to be a written source. The second one is another written source, but it's like a chart. And then the last one will be an audio source, something that you will have to listen to. You will have 6 minutes approximately to read your written source, look at the chart or the graph that they've given you, and then they will play the audio source. It is very important that while you're listening to that audio source, since you've already read the prompt to the argumentative essay, that as you're reading the source, that you are marking the important things in the source that you're reading, and then when you're listening, that you're taking notes on the things that will support your thesis for your argumentative essay. So as soon as it's time to start, read your prompt, start thinking of what theme you're going to use and what your thesis is. So that will guide your reading and your listening to both of the sources. So make sure that you start from the basics. Read the title, read all the little italics, if it's a chart or things like that. So everything like that will give you clues on what things you can use on your essay. Now, in the readings, sometimes the reading that they're giving you, the written source, might include some visuals. And like I said, your second item will be a visual as well, a chart or a graph. So it's important that you can make a relationship. How does this reading relate to this chart that I'm looking at right now? And then keep that in mind as well when you are listening to the audio source. Señores, we could go to the next one. So at the moment that you are reading the printed source, you need to make sure that you figure out what is the main idea that this source is giving me. And then as you are reading, you find out important sentences which eventually will help you on your essay. Also make sure that when you're reading the second source, like I told you, that you can make a relationship between the two of them, compare them and contrast them. Okay, so are they presenting the similar idea? Are they in agreement? Are they making the same point? Is one in favor? Is the other one against? And make sure that you understand what is the message that they are, what is the viewpoint in each one of these sources. And also make sure that you understand how the sources are presenting the practices of the culture that they are representing in the reading. What is the perspective that they're trying to present to you? and if there's any product specifically that they are talking about. If we could go to the next slide. Very important, when you are listening to the audio source, take notes. I cannot emphasize enough. In this 45 minutes that you're going to have between the writing and listening to these sources, you might think, oh, I'll remember. Probably not. Take the time to take notes, because at the moment that you are organizing your ideas and writing these notes, that will also guide you in how to write your essay. Then the good thing is, in this section, they will play for you the audio 2 times. The first time, make sure that you're taking notes. If you feel comfortable at the end of that first time that is being played, you could start writing the essay at the moment that they're reading they're playing the source again, the audio source again. Or you can use that time to make sure that you have all the points that you need. And it's really important that at no time, you might not understand every word, but you can get the gist of what's going on. And make sure that you are concentrating on that. There might be other students taking the test around you. Just focus and try to take good notes that will help you write this essay. Next slide. So, like I said, you're gonna have the 2 sources and you're gonna have the audio source. When it comes time to write the essay, I would recommend that you try to write about 400 words. Now, that sounds like a lot, but if you make sure that you write that much and it's all in under the subject and addressing all your main idea, your thesis statement, and you have all the data that is going to support that, it should come out freely for you. Could a 300-word essay suffice? Absolutely. But if you can manage, don't make don't think, okay, so if I don't write this 400, I'm not passing. No. Address all the points. Cite all your sources. You must mention all the sources, both the printed and the audio source. So which way are you going to do this? According to source number 1, in source number 2, in the audio we heard, or you can hear. So make sure that you are citing or talking about all 3 sources. And between the citing, that's mentioning all these sources, presenting your thesis statement, and your opinion on this essay, talking about what your belief is on this topic, that should get you enough to the right amount of words. And the most important thing is that you can support your main thesis and that you cite all your sources. And this is not something new that has come out of nowhere. This is very similar to the FRQs and the other things that you do for your if you take other AP exams. This is very similar to that idea. If we could go to the next one. So very important that you know exactly what it is that the question that you have to answer. Once again, look at those keywords, and then make sure that you include all the sources and how they support your idea, your viewpoint. It will be nice if you include some cultural reference there. Make sure that you have some higher grammar, hopefully some subjunctive in there, and some prepositional phrases. I will tell you this much. Higher language, higher grammar will give you higher scores. However, the important thing is that you have that you know exactly what you want to say, and that your message can get across. It's really important that even though you don't have that much time, that you organize your ideas and that you then go through through what you wrote to make sure that you have covered everything that needs to do. Once again, time yourself. Feel what 40 minutes, practice what 40 minutes feel like, so you can know how to allot the time in whenever you're preparing to write your essay. Next slide. So you are going to have a specific, remember this test is going to be pencil and paper. So you are going to have a paper that has lines and it has margins. You write inside those lines, on top of the line and inside the margins. And make sure that it's as legibly as you can make it. Make sure that you're following instructions. Make sure that you have planned. Take at least 2 to 3 minutes to plan what you want to say and organize your ideas. Make sure that you have cited your sources. And once again, make sure that when you're checking your work, that you have the same type of checking your agreement, using some higher grammar, etc. And some teachers will share with you the rubric for what College Board does. But you can do this yourself. You can go to the College Board website, and the rubrics for all these activities are available, and you can look at them so you know how you will be scored. So you know what a 5, what you need to do to reach for a 5, a 4, or a 3, which will all be passing grades. I think that's all I have, but let's see. Señora?
Thank you very much, Senora Santiago. I'd like to thank Senora Santiago, Senora French, Senora Gonzalez Wright, and Senora Hensley Damp. I really appreciate the time and the effort they took putting this presentation together and giving you some helpful hints. I'd like to remind you too that it's really important to try and get a good night's sleep the day before the exam. Try and eat something, even if you're not used to eating breakfast. Try and have a good, healthy breakfast that day. It'll make you think better. It'll make you be able to pay closer attention, etc. If you're well rested and you're not thinking about being hungry. I hope you have an excellent experience taking your AP language exam, and thank you for joining us today.